This road has been under construction since before humanity. That's the joke I tell people every time I talk about Esperanza Road. Everyone in town knows it because it's infamous. It's literally where the Road Work Ahead vine was filmed. The construction never seems to end, and by the time school gets out in the area, traffic gets delayed by an hour. No matter how early you leave, if you have to take Esperanza, you will be late. It's a delivery driver's worst nightmare. This was where my route yesterday led me. I had 7 stops, 3 residential addresses, 1 Catholic church, 1 un-Catholic church, a haunted mansion, and my last one located on Esperanza Road. I groaned. After loading all the flowers into my car, I sat down in the driver's seat and read over the delivery instructions for each stop. Not all of them had any specific instructions, and the ones that did were pretty straightforward. The Esperanza stop, however, was last on my route manifest, and it didn't specify any address number, just North Esperanza Road. I narrowed my eyes, then read the delivery instructions. Continue north. In the last story I posted, I relayed to you how strongly my boss had emphasized that I should always read the instructions. What he failed to mention, however, is that for bouquets ordered through the third-party booking website we're partnered with, customers write those instructions themselves. And whether your customer is a middle-aged man in a retirement community or a sentient cactus with needles for fingers, retail is retail. And when you work retail, you know how some customers can be. I'm sure you can imagine the kinds of problems that arise when you let them write the instructions themselves. Sentient cactuses can't really do much with a computer other than smash their meaty pads on the keyboard and pray for the best. So, when I have an order with no name, 0 contact information attached, not even an address number for delivery, and the only instructions are continue north, I can immediately tell they were written by a customer. No one else will provide directions this useless. I rolled my eyes. Customers. I returned to the shop's office and dropped the order sheet on Anna's desk, then tapped the line containing the Esperanza stop. Any idea what we're supposed to do with this? Anna read it, then rolled her eyes. Customers. She turned back to her ancient box computer. It still by some miracle runs Windows 95, then searched Google Maps, scrolling through the satellite view of Esperanza Road. It was more orange than your average road, being made of more construction cones than tarmac, but it didn't appear unnatural otherwise. Anna went quiet, as she usually does when she's given a problem to dissect. She grabbed a handful of chicken bones, blew on them, then cast them on the top of the order sheet. I'm not good enough at reading bones just yet to tell you what they said, but based on her scoffing at the results, I don't think they helped. She tried everything in her arsenal. A dowsing rod, few manifestation spells, a wheat sacrifice accompanied by sylvanic hymns, all of it to no end. Even the orb of revealing yielded nothing useful. Naughty, she called for her husband. For those who haven't seen the last post I've made about my decidedly bizarre job, let me catch you up to speed. Southwest Sunset Floral Arrangements is a local flower shop which occasionally delivers to supernatural clients. It runs by a married couple who serves as 2 supervisors. Anna, a heavy-set woman with a fashion sense of an elementary school art teacher, and Nautilus, a humanoid squid man who looks like if Davy Jones retired from pirating and started a stamp collection. Octopus head, shrimp feeler hands, little spectacles, dresses exactly how you expect a guy in his 50s to dress. Even tells the occasional dad joke. Nautilus came out of the walk-in carrying 2 buckets of red and white carnations in his hands, and several stems of tulips in his face tentacles. When he heard Anna call him, he set the tulips down on a nearby shelf, then glanced between her and I. "It's Esperanza stop, isn't it?" "Do you know what the deal is with this one?" I said, tapping on the order sheet. "I only skimmed it earlier," he said. He picked up the order sheet with two of his face tentacles and traced each line of text with a third as he read through the order details. "These are the only directions they gave, huh?" "Yep." Nautilus rolled his eyes. "Customers." He handed the sheet back to me. "We had a stop like this a few years back," he began. He gestured to Anna. "You remember the Vortex order, right?" "Ah, yes. The little cul-de-sac on the east side." She turned to me. "The instructions said to keep going straight, and our previous driver ended up having to drive down a very windy path on the other side of a hidden vortex. It took a while, but he made it there and back all right. And he really did just have to keep going straight." "You could say the directions were straight forward," Nautilus said, tentacles curling into a wry smile. "Good dad joke," I replied. 7 out of 10. A thought occurred to me, and I frowned. What happened to the previous driver anyway? "Don't worry about that," Anna said, perfectly maintaining her usual bubbly tone of voice. "Just focus on making your deliveries and call us if you need help." A concerning reply, but one I was willing to ignore for a paycheck. I shrugged. All right. My last stop before Esperanza Road was the Haunted Mansion. The poltergeists that lived there were frequent customers of ours, and they were currently trying to scare the new residents into leaving. As a result, their instructions always specified that I leave a vase in a random place around the property where it could be easily knocked over. Feeling as though I deserve a bit of a levity before heading towards Esperanza, I decided to stick around to watch the show. As the father of the family arrived home from work, I retrieved a packet of potato chips from my lunchbox and started munching on them. He pulled into the parking lot to find a vase of roses balanced precariously on his carport. He froze for a moment, then cautiously approached them. I briefly wondered why these people kept going towards these vases, as if they didn't know by now what would happen when they did, but the flowers interrupted that train of thought. As the man approached them, the roses withered, rotting and turning black within seconds. He staggered back in terror, shattering in a spray of rotted petals and broken glass, and he let out a near-perfect impression of a Willem scream. He booked it down the street, somehow forgetting that he could have just driven his car away, and I could practically hear the bongo noise they play in Scooby-Doo whenever the mystery gang has to run from their spook of the day. I laughed so hard I nearly spit out my potato chips. When I finished wiping the tears from my eyes, I begrudgingly checked my GPS, counting how many side roads I could get away with taking before I had no choice but to turn onto Esperanza. I let out something between a sigh and a groan, then shifted my car into gear. Tonight was going to be a long night. I want you to picture the worst construction road you've ever driven on. Really, remember how long you've had to wait until someone was finally generous enough to give you space to turn, only for you to struggle to figure out which two rows of cones you were supposed to drive between. How long did it take? How many stages of grief did you make it through before finally getting into the correct lane? How fleeting was the surge of hope you felt at achieving this goal, only for it to die the moment you realized traffic had returned to a standstill? How many green light cycles did you watch, hopeless as they passed you by, before finally making it past one intersection? Take that agony and multiply that by 3. Actually, 5. Fuck it, multiply it by 10. That is Esperanza Road. Sometimes I think they named it the Spanish word for hope, specifically because it constantly crushes every last ounce of hope you had remaining. Every time the car in front of you starts to move, there's a rush of euphoria, followed by the soul-withering reminder that it'll come to a stop again barely 2 feet ahead of you. Even Google Maps get cranky and starts giving me more frequent alerts for no reason. Road work ahead. Yeah, I sure hope it does. What felt like an hour went by. I checked the clock. It had only been 30 minutes. What felt like 2 hours went by. 45 minutes. I ate up the rest of the food I had packed, cleaned out every last crumb in my lunchbox, still stuck in line. I turned my car off. I tried not to go insane. I think I was on the 3rd or 4th stage of grief when my stomach growled. I checked the time for the 200th time since I've entered this nightmare. 6:34 p.m. I narrowed my eyes. That couldn't be right. I knew time always felt slower when you were stuck in line enough that I've been able to write it off a few times. But I was certain I had turned onto this road around 5:45 and that it had been several hours since then. There's no way it had only been 49 minutes. I checked the length of the audiobook I was listening to. 9 hours and some change. I had been about halfway through it when I turned onto the road. I was now close to the end. There was no way I'd imagined that. I threw on my floral print suit jacket, got out of my car, and climbed onto the roof. The cars in front of me stretched out for miles into the fading sunset, which I realized had lasted way too long. I took off my sunglasses and stowed them in my jacket pocket, then squinted at the cars on the horizon. They were all purple Kia Souls. All of them. It was obviously a supernatural number of purple Kia Souls. There was no point in rationalizing it as a coincidence. And after working at an occult flower shop for a year and a half, this wasn't even the strangest thing I've ever seen. What made this a pants-shitting moment was not the observation on its own. It was the revelation that came seconds after. I looked down at my own vehicle. My car is a purple 2013 Kia Soul. I've had this car for 13 years at this point. I've gone through 3 apartments while still owning this car, and I bought it to escape the trailer park I grew up in. It's more of a home to me than any place I've ever lived in, and ever since contracting a disease that's stealing the use of my legs, it's practically become an extension of my body at this point. And somehow or another, Esperanza Road knew this about me. I glanced back at the brick wall of Kia Souls ahead, dotting the closer portions of the road like patchwork before homogenizing into a sea of purple steel boxes further down. I was willing to bet they were all 2013s too. I looked behind me, normal cars, with a normal variety of makes, models, and colors. I looked ahead, trying to find another purple Kia Soul after mine. It was about 5 spots ahead. With no other ideas, I hopped off the roof of my car, wincing at my feet hitting the ground with too much force and sending a bolt of neuropathic pain shooting up to my hips. Goddamn chronic pain was getting worse by the day. I shook the pins and needles out of my legs, then made the short trek to the next purple Kia Soul. The back windows were covered in too much dust to see through, a detail of my own car that I was surprised the curse on this road had been able to replicate. I glanced down at the bumper of the car to find it was, in fact, a 2013. The interior was where the perfect replication of my car ended, and where it turned into an eerie facsimile. It was full of flowers, but they were all lilies, all packed into boxes with smudged logos and text more jumbled than an AI-generated album cover. I glanced at the front and my heart plummeted into my gut. There was someone in the driver's seat. I swallowed my anxiety and forced myself to move, inches with shallow, trembling breaths, towards the driver's side window. I saw their shoulder first, floral burgundy suit jacket. I stopped, took a breath, Continued. I saw their hand on the steering wheel next. Tattoo of a basic sword, hilt at the wrist, tip of the blade reaching the knuckle below the middle finger. I looked down, examining the more detailed Nordic sword tattoo on my own hands. I shook the tremors out of them. Continued. I saw the side of his head, long, curly brown hair, tied back in a ponytail, hastily trimmed beard, black aviator sunglasses. I touched my suit jacket above the interior pocket, where I had stowed my own aviators moments ago. He was motionless, expressionless, occasionally flickering like a half-rendered hologram. The details were still lacking, but there was no doubt about it. That was me. I froze, like a deer, literally standing in 5 lanes of headlights. I don't even know how long I stayed there, staring at this lifeless projection of myself. I got the sense that I crossed a threshold of some kind and landed in some forgotten corner of purgatory, backed up with people driving towards an unseen drop-off into a furthest limit of existence. I looked west. The sun had finally set. The sky was dark. The purple cars on the horizon were fading like the sunlight, the growing darkness swallowing even the dim glow of their headlights. The sound of an engine revving broke me out of my stupor. My eyes darted up to its source. The car before me was beginning to move. I dashed back towards my own vehicle, jumping into the driver's seat and slamming the door. The white car next to me started to move, inching to the right into a clear ploy to cut in front of me. I shouted a string of curses and insults at him that I don't care to repeat, then slammed on the accelerator for a half a second, just enough to narrowly block him from cutting me off. He started to holler back at me, but his words faded into road noise as every car around us fired up their engines. They rolled ahead in a lopsided, slow-motion wave, just far enough to catch up to the first duplicate Kia I had investigated moments earlier. At the same time, the sunset finally flickered out, and a dark, billowing cloud rolled over the horizon, sweeping down Esperanza Road and engulfing the traffic in a violent dust storm. I curled up in the driver's seat, plugging my ears to drown out the cacophony of pounding as it battered my windshield. I could do nothing but wait for it to stop. It finally subsided, and I ran my windshield wipers twice, just enough to brush away some of the dust. I checked the time. 6:35 p.m. Only a minute had passed. 6 years ago, I had to drive from Arizona to Michigan. When I passed through Oklahoma, it was nothing but fields of grass over miles of pancake flat land, wind wiping across the plains like the rolling waters of a monsoon flood. If you lived in the Midwest, this sight will be familiar to you. Imagine that, but it's traffic cones. Stalks of orange and white striped plastic sprouting out of the ground in dense patches like a cornfield, reflective tape glittering in the glow of my headlights as they swayed in the blustering wind. My car was situated in a clearing at the center of this endless cone maze, with only a dirt patch before it, barely wide enough to drive down. I glanced at my GPS. It was empty except for the road before me. North Esperanza Road. Continue north, I muttered under my breath. It was the only direction I had left to go. So I did. I kept driving north. I ran into signs. Local traffic only. Speed limit reduced. Fines doubled. Lane ends. Lane begins. Lane closed. Road closed. Exit closed. Shoulder work ahead. Detour ahead. Road work ahead. All leading me in one big goddamn figure 8. I reached a sign which read, Dead End, surrounded by an impenetrable circle of cones. Nowhere else to go. I grabbed the flowers from my back seat, just a small bud vase, and exited my car. I approached the dead end sign, bouquet in hand, and checked the attached tag. No name. I took a deep breath, then announced my presence. Delivery for North Esperanza Road? There was motion between the cones, rustling with that unique drum-like sound of hollow plastic tubes colliding. Finally, several large fluorescent orange claws wrapped around the dead end sign and gently pushed it aside. A humanoid figure emerged from behind it on all fours, one long plastic arm dragging it across the ground as it lumbered out from between the densely packed traffic cones. Its body was made of the same orange plastic, clothed in white reflective tape that wound like bandages around the unevenly sized limbs. Where its head should have been, it instead had one circular orange safety light, the LEDs blinking on and off at a slow and steady interval. It stood up straight, towering over me like a mangled orange saguaro cactus. I silently held out the flowers, and with its hollow, segmented claws, it reached out and gently took them from my hands. It held the flowers up to its LED head, examining them the way a jeweler examines a diamond ring. It made a noise akin to humming, although it sounded more like someone tapping their fingers on a plastic barrel, then lowered the flowers again and looked back at me. It bowed low, a gesture which I came to understand as a thank you. Unsure what else I should do, I bowed back. It started to turn away, but I raised a hand to stop it. "Before you go," I said, "can you give me directions out of here?" It croaked, then raised its longest arm and gestured to its left. The cones in that direction all sank into the ground, leaving a straight stretch of dirt road just wide enough for my car. It looked like another long drive. I sighed. At least there weren't any more detours. Before I could leave, it made a gesture that I interpreted as a request to hold out my arm. I obliged, and it waved an orange appendage over my hand. As it did so, I saw motion between the cones behind it. A similar, smaller creature was approaching from within the fields. I watched as it emerged, and the two greeted each other, the second one taking the flowers out of the first one's hand. It made a humming noise. The two creatures touched heads, a tender gesture like a mother wolf comforting one of her litter. I almost didn't notice what it had left on my hand until it nearly blew away. I gripped it and looked down. It was $500. My eyes lit up like a slot machine, and I thanked the creature profusely, excited to go home and order from the most expensive restaurant I could find on DoorDash. After a long drive down the dirt path, I exited the field of cones, right back onto Esperanza Road, still as jammed as it had been when I left. It greeted me with a bright, shiny construction sign. Road work ahead. I cracked up. Yeah, I wheezed, between fits of laughter. I sure hope it does. I obliged, and it waved on a green Jalen?